Welcome to Cold Freedom. I'm your host, Eddie Bales. Have you ever felt stuck? Have you ever felt like there's got to be more than life than the reality that you see every day? Tune in weekly, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays as we crack the codes to freedom in every area of your life. Welcome to Cold Freedom. I'm your host, Eddie Bales, and this is episode 37. And today, we are going to get some folks unstuck. That's right. We're going to talk about how do we get unstuck. And I was fortunate to be a part of a mastermind today with, Bob Proctor's number one mindset coach. And if you don't know who Bob Proctor is real big on how the mind works and stuff like that. You probably saw him on The Secret if you ever saw that movie. But it's just really interesting stuff. And so, let's just jump right in. There's this concept called paradigms, and we've talked about paradigms before in other episodes, but I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper into it today. A paradigm is a set of mental programs that have almost exclusive control over our habitual behavior. And when I think about that, it almost scares me because just think about that. That means we do things and we don't even know why we do it because of mental programs, right? I mean, think about it. Maybe you feel like you hit a plateau or you're stuck in certain areas of life. Like for instance, maybe you find yourself constantly being drawn to bad relationships. You get out of a relationship, then you finally meet someone that's really, really, really good for you. And then you find out that they're really not so good for you and it becomes toxic. And then you move to the next relationship and then it becomes a replica of the last three relationships. And you're like, okay, there's a pattern here. And you don't even know why it's happening. That's what we're going to talk about. Or maybe you find yourself earning great income, but then all of a sudden just not having any. And it's like, wait a minute, I made this much money and I have none left, right? And it's like, okay, something's happening there. When you start to notice patterns, that's why I was thought the word was interesting when it said habitual behavior, because, let's talk about a habit. A habit is a physical expression of a mental programming, right? And of course, these are definitions by, what he shared tonight, actually. But think about that. That means that we continue to do things because we were taught these things and we don't even know why we do it. We just maybe saw someone else do it. We grew up watching it happen. It's just a part of who we are. It's deeply embedded into our subconscious. So we don't even think about it. It's on autopilot. And that's where the scary part is because we don't know why we do it. We just do it, right? And so how do we get free from this? How do we break this situation and just get unstuck? That's what we want to talk about today, because nobody wants to be stuck, but it's not like you're stuck on purpose. It's like you don't even know why. You don't even know. Like, for instance, have you ever heard or seen someone, we all have, that lost it all due to a unforeseen situation, but then they got it all back like quickly, right? That's because they have a paradigm that gets them back there. So that means no matter where they get knocked off course, it's kind of like the whole, they're the thermostat. They set the pace instead of just deciding, letting the wind blow whichever way it's going to go and you just end up wherever. Instead of being the thermometer, you're the thermostat, right? And so habits are critical. We talked about that on several episodes. But where do we get our habits from, right? How do we end up doing these things? Well, I'll tell you, there's three things that you want to focus on, and I'll probably add a couple other things with that. But the first thing is you want to study your mind. Like, you want to be on a pursuit of learning how your mind works, how your brain works. I mean, it's the most powerful thing in the world, your brain, and yet we know very little of it, most of us, right? It's better than any computer processor, right? but yet we know very little about how it works. So that's something I would suggest is study the mind, study how your brain works, but also, study, like growth and personal development. That's one thing that we always talk about here is getting better. How do we get better at ourselves? Right? Are we reading? Are we listening on a regular and consistent basis? See, we have to unprogram all the junk that's been deeply embedded into our subconscious, right? So, they say that we are created for success, but programmed for failure. And the reason why we're programmed for failure is because grandpa might have been programmed that way, and then great grandpa or great grandma was programmed that way, and then great great grandpa and grandma were programmed that way. And the next thing you know, here you are, and 4 generations later, you have no clue why. It's just a part of who you are, right? It's just because what you saw, it's because of what you experienced. It's just because it's just become who you are. So that's number one. Study, 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 study your mind and study for your mind. Number two is to study your craft. Like study, like whatever industry you're in, like you need to know anything and everything there is about it, right? And you want to break through in a situation where you're not just doing the mundane thing that everyone else is doing in that industry, but you just have to take it up a notch. You learn more than everyone in that industry. You become a master. There's a difference between, there's a quote by Bruce Lee, and he says, "I don't fear the man who takes 10,000 kicks, but I fear the man who kicks 10,000 times the same way." I'm saying it wrong, but the whole preface of it is becoming a master, right? I'll get that quote before this podcast is over. But that's number two, is to study your craft, to become really, 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 really good to a point where you now have developed a new paradigm in that industry because you've gotten so good at what you do, because you studied, right? And so the third thing is to have daily measurable action. Daily measurable action. And we've talked about that as well. Like if it's not trackable, then you can't grow it. How can you ever grow it? I always tell my organization that I work with, if you can't track it, you cannot improve what you do not track. You cannot improve what you do not track. So what are you tracking every single day that you can get better at? And by the way, that quote, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times." Right? So that's what we're talking about in terms of mastery. But back to daily measurable action. What are we doing every single day to move toward that, to move toward where we want to be, to get past where we are in all those situations? We have to reprogram our mind. We have to feed it new things. We have to get ourselves in the right environment. We have to change up our affirmations. We have to change what we see, what we hear, like our eye gauge, our ear gauge, all those things. They bring into our lives a certain feeling. And once we start to feel those things, emotions happen. And once those emotions happen, it ends up affecting our behavior. Okay. So the point here is that we have to really make sure that we shift the narrative. We shift what we see. We shift what we hear. So for me, I remember my old bedroom when I was a bachelor, and I used to have these signs all over my room, these philosophies. And I had them hanging up all over my room because I wanted to deeply embed those philosophies into my subconscious. And they are, because I still can quote just about all of them because I live by them now, right? Like act the way you want to feel, and then you'll feel the way you act. Or it's not the blowing of the wind, but the set of the sail. Or, um, you know, you know, we have the opportunity to live life on a different level, and so we have to just think thoughts are things, and we have to think the right thoughts, and we have to be around the right people, and we have to see the right things. So, like for instance, I have a digital dream board. I have a digital dream board. You've heard of vision boards, but I have a digital dream board because I want to be able to see And I want to be able to see it so often that it becomes a part of my reality. It becomes a part of who I am. And it becomes like, it's almost as if I'm living it because I'm seeing it so much. I'm like, this is just my life. This is how I live, right? And even though it may not be my current reality, it's my reality. If I can get it to be my reality in my subconscious, then guess what? My subconscious is going to play it out into reality, right? Because the subconscious doesn't know whether it's reality or not. It only knows what you program it. See, the baby only knows what you program it. The computer software only knows what software you put into it. And then it's going to perform based on what you put in. So that's my whole point is, are we studying our mind and studying for our mind? Are we constantly growing? Are we constantly reading and listening to audios? That's why it's great that you listen to this podcast. And I hope you're subscribed to this podcast so that you can continue, because I'm going to keep bringing great guests. I have another great guest coming for our next episode. But I'm going to keep bringing as much great content for you to kind of continue to change your paradigm so that you can be free. Right? Are you studying your craft? Are you becoming better at what you do so you can be the best of the best? And then also, do you have some daily measurable action that you can track and that you can continue to improve so that you get yourself to a place where you are no longer stuck and you have changed the paradigm, and now you have a new paradigm, and your paradigm is, it's like, for instance, I'll just say this. There are some people who think that maybe they think that it's hard to make six figures, right? And then there are other people who they think it's easy to make six figures. Now, the only difference between the two is their paradigm. The only difference between the two is their paradigm. There are people who have a mindset to work, and then there are other people who have a mindset to be an entrepreneur. And there's nothing wrong with either one of them. It's just that both of them have a certain paradigm. One wants to own, and the other one doesn't mind just working in that opportunity, as an employer, right? I'm sorry, as an employee, right? So what are we going to do? How are we going to change the paradigm? I want you to really think about this. I really want you to think about how you can shift and change your paradigms in your life and start to develop new programs, because obviously it took us a long time to get to I mean, just imagine that you've been programmed for 20 years if you're 20 years old, 30 years, 40 years, right? And it takes a while to unprogram it, right? It's not going to happen overnight. So at least be intentional about unprogramming yourself, so that way you don't just end up 20 more years or 10 more years or 30 more years from now being in the same place. We get to decide, right? We get to decide that, but we have to decide that or it will never change. So I hope you guys got some value from this. This is how you get unstuck. And the biggest thing I can tell you is to constantly affirm, constantly see, drive in those neighborhoods you want to live in. You got to feel the feelings as if you are already living it. And then you're starting to have your subconscious to believe that it is the case. And then you will start to attract certain situations in your life, or when situations happen, you'll perceive it a certain way. There is no good or bad. It's just how you perceive it, right? Because one person could have one thing happen to them and another person could perceive it in a totally different way. Same thing, but they could perceive it in a different way that will be for their good, for their benefit, instead of for their detriment, right? And so there's this joke. It's not really a joke, but uh, these two gentlemen were dumped into Africa, and one said that they were charged to sell shoes, right, in Africa. And the one says, hey, send me back. Nobody wears shoes here. What were y'all thinking, right? And the other one says, hey, nobody wears shoes here. Send me more shoes, right? And so what if you were that second person? What if you were that one that looked for the opportunities in everything, right? But you got to be trained that way sometimes because, hey, let's just be honest. Sometimes maybe we saw our parents look at the negative side of things, and maybe we saw their parents, and the next thing you know, we become the third generation, the fourth generation to do the same exact thing. I want you to look at that though. Start looking at something that maybe your parents did that you do now, and you didn't even realize you did it. Like, wait a minute, I do that. And then just look and see if you have the opportunity, if your grandparents do that or did that, or ask questions, right? If they're not around. And start to be an investigator, because you're the way you are for a reason. And it's not by chance. It happened for a reason, but we can shift it if we can identify it, right? So start to identify those things that we need to change. I've identified some things already that I know are in my family that I refuse to live by. I refuse to allow it to happen to my future generations, and the buck stops here. I've already drew the line in the sand, and I'm looking forward to creating a new legacy for the next generations to come, right? And so I hope you do the same thing. So anyway, again, I hope you guys got some value from this. Stay tuned. We have some incredible episodes coming up, and make sure you subscribe, make sure you share, tag me on Instagram, all that good stuff. And I can't wait to see you at the next episode. Take care. God bless. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you guys for listening. Definitely feel free to take a screenshot of this episode, tag me in it on Instagram or Facebook or wherever you find me on social media. I would love to give you a shout out. Hey, you might even get a prize. Who knows? But excited that you had a chance to take a listen. I hope you got a lot of value. And definitely feel free to give us 5 stars as well as a review. Show us some love, and we appreciate you. God bless you all, and see you all over the top.